ago, there's my sound. A number of years ago, one of my nieces came to me and she had a simple request. She wanted me to take her out driving so that she could practice for her license. And my first question, of course, was, well, why don't you ask your mother and father? That's their job. And her response was, well, they're always so busy, and then when we do go some places, my brothers and sisters are along, and I can't drive. And so my response to her was, well, let me think about it, which is really my nice way of saying, not in this lifetime. Because I knew and had heard stories about her driving, and I do not have a death wish. I don't. And even more so, I lack patience. And I mean, it's grown over the years, but I lack patience. And I know she would not learn well with me screaming at her about how she's driving. But my niece was pretty insistent. And every time she asked, I responded the same way. Well, let me think about that. Until one day she called me on it, right? She goes, that's just your nice way of saying no, isn't it? And so I caved. I took her out driving. And in all honesty, she was pretty good about most things, but she had one fatal flaw. She had a hard time judging speed and distance, so that when we were coming to a turn or to a stop sign, she wouldn't apply the brakes soon enough, right? So we're in the car and we're driving, and it starts something like this. You might want to apply your brakes now. Apply your brakes now. Brake, 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 brake. And we whip around this corner, and I think it felt like we were on two wheels. And I said, pull over. I need time for my blood pressure and my heart rate to go down because my head feels like it's going to pop off. And so it became this thing. She found a way to get me to say yes. And every time when we get in the car, I would start with this little mantra. So what are we going to do? We're going to watch our speed. So what are we going to do? We're going to apply our brake. And over time, things got better. I share that experience because I am often inspired by the people I've met along the way. And I imagine each one of you could name 20 people who have wanted something or were passionate about something, and their persistence and their dedication in achieving that particular goal in their life. And sometimes it's simple things like her wanting to obtain her driver's license. But sometimes it's larger things like someone who has a dream about a career path and how dedicated and persistent and committed they are to that. And then I ponder and take a time to take a step back. And I think about our journey of faith, right? We're here because we know our need for God, right? We know that without God in our life, we will be forever imprisoned in sin and darkness. We are here because we realize that God is that source then that enables us to experience the life that we were created to have, the life we were meant to have. You listen to the opening prayer to this. God provides all of that which surpasses every one of our desires, right? And we know that. But do we live that, right? Is God a priority in our life? Are we persistent about making sure we have that solid, strong, powerful relationship with God? Are we open, in other words, to the very gift of redemption and salvation that God is offering us? Or, as so often is the case when it comes to our relationship with God, is it when it's convenient for me? And if today, in the busyness of my life, I can find a moment to maybe squeeze God in, right? As we break open the Word, we hear of that glorious love that God has for us. He wants us to experience redemption. He wants to give us everything that surpasses any desire we might ever have. But it's up to us, of course, to accept the gift, to walk into the mystery, to take the journey of faith, and to have that relationship with God. And the Canaanite woman does such a beautiful job in witnessing that reality, right? Of that understanding of her need for God and her desire to experience what God and God alone can offer. So it starts with that persistence, right? No matter what obstacles she encountered, no matter how harsh it seemed at the moment, she was persistent about understanding and calling out and asking for the help that she needed. Absolutely persistent, determined. Nothing was going to get in her way, and she was going to find a way to enter into that experience that God and God alone could provide. And then secondly, notice how humble she is about that, right? Notice how humble she is about that. Jesus basically calls her a dog. Do you realize that? He basically says, why should I take the children of the food and feed it to the dogs? And he basically calls her a dog. And in her humbleness, in her knowing her desperate need for what God and God alone could provide, she has this quick-witted response. It's a beautiful response to what Jesus has just said to her. But even the dogs eat the scraps that fall on the table. And that's when we encounter an experience of Christ we've never encountered before, right? It's the only gospel passage, by the way, that it appears that Christ treats somebody without dignity, right? And you can't read it like Christ is having a bad day because he was fully human and he was crabby, right? You can't read it that way because that means he sins. And we know Christ didn't sin. What he's asking and what he's making very clear is that, do you really want to follow where I'm going to go? Do you really want to experience the life I'm offering? And are you willing to surrender to my will and trust that I will give you what you need? And her response is very clear, right? Her response is an absolute yes. I know I need you. I know it is only for your grace that I will be able to get to where I need to go. And in that moment, she makes a clear choice to follow Christ. She makes a clear choice to be a disciple of Christ and go where he would lead. And then ultimately, it is about exactly what God is offering. Redemption, an abundance of life, an experience of a fullness of life that is the promise of one day seeing God face to face and knowing the fullness of life that we were created to have. It is about being healed and restored and filled with that grace that provides for our every need as we take this journey of faith. That's what it's all about. And a Canaanite woman knows that. And she shows us how determined and passionate she is about entering into that mystery. And so the question for us is, are we willing to do the same? Same persistence and determination to be humble enough to know that we can't do this without God, and to surrender ourselves so that we can experience the love that he is bestowing, the grace, the salvation, the redemption.